The air in Marcus Thorne's office was colder than a Chicago winter. For 20 years, I'd given Apex Freight my life. Now I stood before his polished mahogany desk, a man with nothing left to lose. "It's over, Marcus," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "The falsified manifests, the hidden compartments in Container 7B, I know everything." His smile was a thin, predatory line. He leaned back, a king in his leather throne, utterly unfazed. "And what do you plan to do, Ethan? Go to the police?" The word hung in the air, a lit fuse. He didn't even wait for my answer. "You're fired," he spat. "Get out." He thought that was the end of it. I just stood there, letting the word fired hang in the sterile, expensive air between us. He expected me to shatter, to plead. 20 years of my life. Early mornings, missed birthdays, the kind of loyalty that feels like family, erased with 2 words. He saw a broken old man. He was wrong. He didn't know about the last 3 months. The sleepless nights weren't about quarterly reports. They were about my sister's son, a good kid with a bright future, found unconscious in an alley. The poison that put him there had a shipping label, an Apex Freight shipping label. That's when my loyalty shifted. It wasn't to Marcus or his company anymore. It was to every family his greed had touched. I met his smug, dismissive gaze, and for the first time in 2 decades, I felt no intimidation. Only a cold, hard certainty. I didn't move for the door, I didn't even flinch. Instead, a small, grim smile touched my lips. "You think this is over?" I said, my voice dangerously calm. "Marcus, for you, it's just beginning." Marcus let out a short, humorless laugh, a puff of air that dismissed 20 years of my life. "Is that a threat, Ethan?" "Security!" He barked towards the intercom on his desk, his finger jabbing the button. I didn't move, I just watched him. Security wasn't coming. He didn't understand the board he was playing on anymore. He thought this was his office, his company. But for the last 94 days, this had been my hunting ground. That hunt began with a phone call that tore my world apart. It was my sister, Sarah, her voice a frayed wire over the line. "It's Leo," she'd sobbed. "He's at Chicago Med. They said it was fentanyl." My nephew, a bright-eyed kid who wanted to be an architect, was lying in an ICU bed, his future erased by a dose of poison. A week later, sitting at Sarah's kitchen table, her husband Frank, a CPD detective, slammed his fist on the table. "This stuff is flooding the West Side, Ethan. Pure, deadly, and it comes in like clockwork. Has to be a major logistics operation. Night climb logistics." The word hit me like a physical blow. Our company. My company. That night, I didn't go home. I went back to the office and slipped into the system I helped build. I wasn't looking for profit margins. I was looking for a ghost. I found it in Container 7B. A recurring shipment from an electronics supplier in Guangzhou routed through a quiet port in British Columbia before being trucked to Chicago. To anyone else, it looked normal. But the weight was always off. By exactly 200 kilograms. Too precise for an error. It was a signature. I pulled the thread. The Shell Corporation in Guangzhou. The trucking firm in Canada. The payments, all routed through a subsidiary in the Caymans that Marcus had set up for, quote, tax efficiency. I saw the whole rotten structure, a machine I'd helped maintain, now being used to pump poison into my own city, into my own family. Going to Frank was a death sentence. Marcus had too many badges on his payroll. So I went federal. I found a number for a DEA task force and left a coded message. The next day, I was in a noisy diner downtown, sitting opposite a woman named Agent Miller. She had eyes that missed nothing. I didn't waste time. I slid a thumb drive across the sticky table. "This is his playbook," I said. "Manifests, payment trails, shipping routes. He's using Apex Freight to smuggle fentanyl." She was skeptical, but the data didn't lie. Her expression hardened as she scanned it on a small tablet. "He's arrogant," she said, her voice low. "He feels untouchable." Her plan was simple, and it was dangerous. We can seize the drugs, but Thorne will just sacrifice a driver. We need Tuantama. We need a catalyst, something that forces his hand in a way we can record. I looked at the thumb drive, then back at her unflinching gaze. I'll be the catalyst, I said. And now, here we were. The trap was set. The bait had been taken. Marcus jabbed the intercom again, his knuckles white. "Greg, get in here now! I want this man removed from my property." The speaker hissed with static, then fell silent. A vein throbbed in his temple. He glared at me, his composure finally cracking. "What did you do?" "Greg's with his daughter," I said, my voice low and even. "She needed a new heart, Marcus." A spot opened up on the transplant list at Northwestern last month. Amazing coincidence. Turns out a generous anonymous donation to the hospital's cardiothoracic wing can work wonders. I let that sink in. Loyalty is an expensive commodity. You just never paid your people enough to afford it. His face shifted from confusion to a deep, simmering rage. He understood. I hadn't just gone over his head. I'd gone under his feet, cutting away the very ground he stood on. "You think you're so damn clever?" he seethed, his hands balling into fists on the polished mahogany. "No," I replied, taking a deliberate step closer to his desk. "I just learned from the best. I paid attention to how you operate. You find a weakness, a vulnerability, and you leverage it. I'm just applying your business model to you." I leaned forward slightly. "That shipment from Vancouver, Marcus, container 7B? The one with the extra 200 kilos of circuit boards. It's being unloaded at O'Hare as we speak. Your buyer is waiting. A very important, very dangerous man. What do you think he's going to do when his multi-million-dollar order doesn't show up?" This was the catalyst, Miller's linchpin. I was threatening the lifeblood of his operation, forcing him to react. He snatched his phone, his thumb frantically swiping to a contact labeled Javier. "I wouldn't do that," I said calmly. "Agent Miller's team has had a wiretap on that number for weeks. In fact, I'd wager they're having a very polite chat with Javier right now." I reached into my jacket pocket and placed a simple, black ballpoint pen on his desk. It rolled an inch, the silver clip glinting under the recessed lighting. She also insisted I use this. "The microphone is state-of-the-art. It's been recording every word since I walked in here. Your confession, your threats, everything." The color drained from his face. The phone slipped from his suddenly nerveless fingers, clattering onto the desk. He stared at the pen as if it were a snake. Then his eyes shot to mine, the full, horrifying scope of his situation finally crashing down on him. The arrogance was gone, replaced by the raw panic of a cornered rat. "You son of a bitch," he whispered, the words choked with disbelief. "You signed your own death warrant." "You ruined my family," I shot back, the ice in my voice finally cracking to let the fire through. "You put my nephew in a hospital bed. You did this to yourself." He exploded. It wasn't a calculated move. It was pure, primal fury. He vaulted over the desk with a speed that defied his age, grabbing the front of my shirt and shoving me back against the wall of glass that overlooked the city. The skyline blurred behind his contorted face. "I'll kill you," he roared, his voice echoing in the soundproofed office. "I'll kill you and your whole damn family." This was it. The final piece Miller needed. Not just the admission of guilt, but the unhinged, violent threat that proved who he really was. I didn't fight back. I just met his enraged eyes with a look of cold, grim satisfaction. "You're too late, Marcus." Just then, the intercom, which had been silent for so long, crackled to life. It wasn't Greg's voice, it was a woman's, calm and authoritative. "Marcus Thorne." Agent Miller's voice filled the room. "This is the DEA. We have a warrant for your arrest. We've been listening to this entire conversation. The building is surrounded. Please open the door." The sound of the intercom clicking off was louder than a gunshot in the sudden, dead silence. For a long second we were frozen, a tableau of broken trust and imminent justice. Marcus's grip on my shirt went slack. The primal rage in his eyes flickered and died, replaced by the bottomless black terror of a man watching his world get swept away by a tidal wave he never saw coming. I calmly reached up and peeled his fingers from my collar, one by one. He offered no resistance. His hands, which had been instruments of power just moments before, felt like dead weight. He stumbled back, his expensive shoes scuffing against the plush carpet, until he hit the edge of his own mahogany desk. That desk, his altar of commerce and corruption, was now just a piece of wood holding him up. The heavy oak door swung inward without a sound. Agent Miller stood in the doorway, flanked by two agents in full tactical gear, their faces grim. Her eyes flicked from me to Marcus, a quick, professional assessment. She didn't have to say a word. The authority radiated from her. Marcus didn't seem to see them. He was still staring at me, his mouth opening and closing like a fish pulled from water. The illusion of his power had shattered so completely, he couldn't process the reality that replaced it. "Marcus Thorne," Miller said, her voice cutting through the tension. "You're under arrest for drug trafficking, money laundering, and conspiracy." One of the agents moved forward, pulling Marcus's hands behind his back. The sharp click of the handcuffs was a final, metallic punctuation mark on his entire career. It was only then that his focus broke from me. He looked down at the steel on his wrists, then back at me, his face a mask of utter disbelief and hatred. "You!" he rasped, the single word dripping with venom. "You did this! After everything I gave you." I straightened my shirt, smoothing the wrinkles his panic had left behind. I thought of my nephew, Leo, lying in that hospital bed. I thought of the 20 years I'd given this man, believing in a lie. I met his gaze, devoid of any heat or anger. All I felt was a cold, quiet finality. "No, Marcus," I said, my voice low but clear enough for the pen's microphone to catch every syllable. "You built this entire operation. I just delivered the final invoice." They led him past me. He wouldn't look at me again. I watched through the glass wall as they escorted him into the elevator, a king being led from his castle in chains. The doors slid shut, and his reflection vanished. It was over. The silence that remained wasn't empty. It was the sound of justice finally being served. Agent Miller walked over, her face unreadable, and I held out the pen. She took it gingerly, like it was a retired weapon, and tucked it into a small evidence bag. "We got it all, Ethan," she said, her voice low. "The confession, the threats against your family, that was textbook. He'll be put away for a very long time." I nodded, but my eyes weren't on her. They were on the bank of monitors behind Marcus's desk, displaying global shipping routes, active vessel locations, and warehouse inventories. Green and amber dots blinking across a map of the world. The nervous system of Apex Freight. I could feel its pulse. It was still alive. "He's gone," I said, turning to face her, "but the monster he built is still breathing. You've cut off the head, but the body will keep moving. The suppliers in Guangzhou won't just stop producing. The distributors here in Chicago, the ones working under Javier, they're not going to pack up and go home. They'll just find a new head, a new logistics company." I walked over to the desk, my hand hovering over the keyboard. I knew every shortcut, every back-end password, every ghost file in this system, because I had designed most of it. "And what happens when Javier's people start asking questions?" I continued, my gaze locking with hers. "When they wonder who disrupted their supply chain, they won't go after the DEA. They'll go after the source of the problem. They'll come for me, for my sister, for her son." Miller was silent for a moment, the tactical vest she wore over her plain clothes seeming to absorb the sound in the room. "We have protective measures, Mr. Vance. Witness protection." I cut her off with a shake of my head. "Hiding isn't a solution. It's a life sentence. No, we don't hide. We finish this. Right here. Right now." I finally sat down in Marcus's chair. It was still warm. The leather sighed under my weight. For the first time, from this seat, the sprawling view of the Chicago skyline didn't feel like a monument to power. It felt like a chessboard. Container 7B was just one shipment. I explained, my fingers flying across the keyboard, pulling up screens she'd never seen. Encrypted manifests. Shadow accounts. Marcus wasn't a one-trick pony. He had 3 other major routes. One moving product through the port of LA, disguised as auto parts. Another through Miami mixed with agricultural imports. He spread the risk. I know every route, every shell corporation, every contact. Her eyes narrowed, tracking the data flooding the screens. "What are you proposing?" Marcus used this system to orchestrate his entire operation with surgical precision. I said, my voice dropping, filled with a cold intensity I hadn't known I possessed. I'm going to use it to perform an autopsy. We're going to send a message down the supply chain. A very specific, very calculated message. I pointed to a blinking icon on a satellite map. This is a freighter, the Odyssey, 2 days out from Long Beach. It's carrying his next big shipment. The manifest says it's full of transmissions for a plant in Detroit. It's not. And Javier's West Coast counterpart is expecting it to dock in 48 hours. I looked up at Miller. Here's my move. I'm going to issue a system-wide recall notice. A. Catastrophic container seal failure. I'll reroute the Odyssey and 2 other key shipments, the ones from Miami and a smaller one coming over the Canadian border, to a single consolidated location for emergency inspection, a location of your choosing. A quiet, isolated Apex warehouse outside of Gary, Indiana, perhaps. A flicker of understanding, and then of alarm, crossed her face. You want to gather all his top-level distributors in one place, at one time? Exactly, I confirmed. I'll make the data look legitimate. I'll fake the insurance alerts. I'll send out panicked internal emails that your wiretaps will pick up, confirming the story. From their perspective, it will look like the whole Apex network is in chaos, on the verge of collapse. They'll be desperate to secure their products before it gets seized or lost. It's a fire sale. They'll all rush to the same place to protect their investment. It was a breathtakingly audacious plan. Using the company's own emergency protocols to spring the largest trap in the agency's history. It was dangerous. It was reckless. And it was the only way. They'll be armed. They'll be paranoid, Miller cautioned, her mind clearly running through the tactical implications. It'll be a bloodbath if it goes wrong. It won't go wrong, I said with absolute certainty. I brought up another window on the screen. The warehouse's internal schematics. I'd overseen the security installation myself 5 years ago. I know where every camera is, every blind spot, every entry and exit point. I can lock down the entire facility from this keyboard. I can guide your teams in, box them in, and they will never see it coming. You won't be going in blind. You'll be going in with the architect. She stared at me, at the screens, at the calm, resolute set of my jaw. She saw I wasn't a victim anymore. I wasn't just a witness. I was a weapon she could use to eradicate the entire organization in one clean stroke. My nephew is still in the hospital, Agent Miller, I said, my voice softening for the first time. He's fighting. The doctors say he has a long road ahead. I'm not just doing this for justice. I'm doing this so that when Leo finally wakes up, the world is a little bit safer than it was when he closed his eyes. I need to burn this network to the ground so that its shadow can never touch my family again. The silence stretched on, thick with risk and potential. I had laid all my cards on the table. This wasn't just whistleblowing anymore, this was war, and I was volunteering to lead the charge from the command center of the enemy. Finally, she pulled out her phone and tapped a number. She didn't take her eyes off me. "Get me Director Evans," she said into the phone. "Tell him we're moving to Phase 2. I have a civilian asset with a high-value strategic plan. Call sign, invoice." She hung up and gave me a single sharp nod. It was all the confirmation I needed. My hands returned to the keyboard. The fight wasn't over. It had just begun. And from the throne of my fallen enemy, for the next 36 hours I didn't sleep. Marcus Thorne's penthouse office, once a symbol of his corrupt empire, became my command center. Agent Miller had a small tactical team secure the floor, turning it into a fortress of blinking screens and encrypted radio chatter. My call sign, Invoice, was the only name I answered to. I moved through Apex's digital nervous system like a ghost. I didn't just reroute the ships, I built a legend around the chaos. I used a ghost protocol Marcus himself had designed for catastrophic events, a digital panic room. An automated alert screamed from my terminal. Container seal compromise. Protocol Omega. It went out to every high-level manager, every regional director, and, thanks to the wiretaps, to every one of Marcus's key distributors. The bait was a fabricated insurance report detailing a massive seizure by Canadian Customs. I made it look like the entire network was about to be exposed. The only assets not yet compromised were the 3 shipments I was now steering towards the warehouse in Gary. The message was clear: get your product now or lose everything. "They're taking it," Miller said, her voice a low hum beside me. On the main monitor, a satellite map glowed. 3 GPS trackers, representing the top lieutenants from the West Coast, Miami, and the Canadian border, were on the move. 3 sharks swimming toward the same drop of blood in the water. I sent the final message, cloned to look like it came from Marcus's panicked second-in-command. "Warehouse 4, Gary, midnight, cash and carry. First come, first served. Burn this after reading." It was crude, it was desperate, and it was exactly how these men operated. Greed would always trump caution. By 11:45 p.m., the map was a cluster of blinking red lights around a single gray square. "They're all on site, Invoice," Miller breathed into her headset. "All 3 crews, they're walking into the main loading bay." I brought up the warehouse camera feeds. The grainy night vision images showed a dozen men, tense and heavily armed, meeting in the center of the cavernous space. They were already arguing, guns held low but ready. They thought they were there to claim their share. They didn't realize they were the shipment. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. Beside me, I'd placed the only personal item I'd brought from my old desk. A small, framed photo of my nephew, Leo, grinning at his high school graduation. His future. The reason for all of this. "Eagle 1, are your teams in position?" I asked, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. "Affirmative, Invoice." "On your command." I looked at Leo's smiling face one last time. "Execute." On my screen, I typed a single command line, //lockdown.exebay_all kill_lights, . The effect was instantaneous. On the camera feeds, the massive steel roll-up doors of Warehouse 4 slammed shut with a deafening finality, plunging the bay into absolute darkness. Panic erupted. I could see their silhouettes scrambling, lit only by the frantic beams of their weapon-mounted flashlights. Then I initiated the second command, //lights.exe sector_gamma . A single bank of harsh, industrial floodlights snapped on, isolating the distributors in a perfect circle of white light in the center of the bay. They were blinded, exposed, trapped like rats in a bucket. "All teams, go!" Miller's voice was iron. Through the silent feeds, I watched tactical units pour in from the shadowed corners of the warehouse. They moved with a terrifying, fluid precision. It wasn't a firefight, it was a harvest. The distributors, so powerful just moments before, dropped their weapons, hands shooting into the air, their faces etched with the shock of a perfectly sprung trap. It was over in 90 seconds. "Invoice, we have total containment," Miller reported, a hint of awe in her professional tone. "All high-value targets in custody. Clean sweep. Absolutely clean." I leaned back in Marcus's leather chair, the tension draining out of me, leaving a hollow ache behind. I had used the tools of my trade, logic, efficiency, systems, to dismantle a machine of death. I had orchestrated it all from a glass tower, miles away, watching it unfold like a video game. But the victory felt distant, surreal. The red lights on the map were gone, but the image of Leo in his hospital bed remained. My phone buzzed on the mahogany desk, pulling me from the screen. It was my sister, Sarah. My heart seized. It was late. A call this late could only mean one thing. I answered, my hand trembling slightly. "Ethan?" Her voice wasn't frayed with grief. It was thin, watery, but filled with something I hadn't heard in months. Hope. "Sarah? What is it? Is he—" "He's awake, Ethan," she sobbed, a sound of pure, unadulterated relief. "The doctors. They don't know why, but his fever broke. He just woke up. He asked for me. I closed my eyes, the screen full of captured criminals blurring into nothing. In the sterile quiet of my enemy's office, I finally understood. Justice wasn't about the arrests on a screen, it was about the sound of my sister's voice, raw with a hope I thought was lost forever. It was about one good kid getting a second chance. The tactical victory was Miller's. This was mine. The phone call ended. I didn't say much, just listened to Sarah cry and laugh at the same time, two sounds that shouldn't exist together but somehow made perfect sense. I sank back into Marcus's chair, the leather groaning under a weight that suddenly felt immense and, at the same time, miraculously light. The adrenaline that had fueled me for 36 straight hours evaporated, leaving a profound, bone-deep exhaustion in its wake. It was a clean, kind of tired. The kind you feel after a job is truly finally finished. Agent Miller stood by the window giving me space. When I finally looked up, her professional mask had softened. "We couldn't have done this without you, Ethan," she said, using my real name for the first time. "You didn't just provide intel, you beat him at his own game, using his own weapons." "He used this company to poison my family," I said, my voice quiet. My gaze drifted to the monitors, still displaying the aftermath of the raid. Static feeds, GPS trackers gone dark. I just used it to deliver the antidote. I stood up, my legs unsteady. I walked to the main terminal, my fingers finding the keys out of pure muscle memory. I initiated one last command. A system-wide data wipe of every shadow account, every ghost manifest, every corrupted file I had uncovered. I was salting the earth, making sure nothing like this could ever grow here again. The screens went black. Apex Freight, as a criminal enterprise, was digitally erased. My work was done. I picked up the small, framed photo of Leo from the desk. His grin seemed wider now. I turned to Miller. "What happens now?" "For you," she replied, a small, unreadable smile playing on her lips. "Whatever you want. We'll debrief in the morning. For now, go be with your family." She handed me an unmarked keycard. "This will get you out. Leave it at the front desk." I walked out of that office without looking back. The king was in chains, his kingdom in ashes, and my nephew was awake. The invoice was paid in full. What's the best instant karma moment you've ever witnessed at a job? I need to hear some stories in the comments.